Brothers podcast, a Five Pillars of Mad Monoliths production.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers, sisters, friends, and those foes amongst you. I pray you all well and welcome to another episode of the Blood Brothers podcast with your host, Dilly Hussain, and my co-host.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, Aki Hussain.
And we have a very special guest. And again, I'm trying to work on this whole kind of thesaurus vocab thing about special guests. But today's guest is someone who's very close to me, someone very dear to me, someone whose counsel I take very seriously, who I consider to be a friend and a companion, and someone who I feel will play an important role in the future of Islam and Muslims in Britain. And that is Shaykh Asrar Rashid from Birmingham, Islam.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. I was going to say Birmingham, Islam, Birmingham Sharif, but it requires something at the end of Birmingham.
Birmingham Sharif. There you go. Why not?
You know, how was your journey here?
Alhamdulillah, very good. We had one stopover and then we got to Bedford Sharif.
Yeah. We've not got to that.
Brilliant.
The maqam of Bedford hasn't got there. We have Luton Sharif.
Oh,
Yeah.
down the road.
Yeah, down the road. You know, being a scholar and prior to that, a student of knowledge, born and raised in Birmingham, right?
Yes, born and raised in Birmingham.
It has its very unique challenges. I'll tell you why that is. It's because Birmingham has been nearly always in the press for good, bad and ugly. But of late, a lot of bad stuff. ISIS fighters, foiled terror plots, Trojan horse, the LGBT row, stabbings, drugs, you name it. Do you think being a scholar in Birmingham has its own unique challenges?
Living in Birmingham, firstly, Birmingham has a unique history within the UK also, because you have the likes of Matthew Bolton and Joseph Chamberlain and Joseph Priestley.
Okay.
All these historical figures. The Lloyds Bank was founded in Birmingham. So the Muslim migration to Birmingham started in the mid 1900s, from the 1950s. So people from the Indian subcontinent, when they migrated with a different mindset to the political refugees that come now. So that makes our background more confident in political issues. So when we're free to criticize in terms of politics, we're free to speak up how we think, what we are thinking regarding leaders. And that's mainly because the mindset of our forefathers, when they came as free people and came there to work. So when they settled in Birmingham, unfortunately with the new generation, what I feel, they abandoned the good qualities of the old generation, kept the bad qualities, and adopted only the bad qualities of the host country, and they didn't adopt the good qualities of the host country. So that then is magnified in some of the...
So what are some of these qualities?
For instance, football culture, you have people, Muslims, adopting a football hooligan culture. But likewise,
He's one of them.
they will have
I don't think inshallah the Shaykh would admit he's not found that to be the case.
Not yet. You're not going to exactly start singing.
I think you should cover your brother if you feel
Okay. Sorry, Shaykh.
if you feel
Okay.
he does have those qualities. But what they did have is some of the bad qualities of the host country they adopted, and then the bad qualities of the former countries they kept. So because of that, when Muslims do something that is criminal, that is magnified in the media. But the only way for Muslims to avoid this is Islam, meaning adopting the adab, mannerisms of Islam, which is the prophetic way.
Of course. But you know when you say some of the bad aspects of the host nation, would you say then that's the kind of like the lifestyle choices, let's say, clubbing, partying, violence, engaging in quick money, engaging in vice? Is that the kind of things that you're saying that they may have adopted?
Yes, because when the early generation came in the 1950s, they worked for their money. They didn't have this concept of quick money. They would do shifts in factories for 12 hours and more. The properties that they bought were bought with hard-earned money. The wealth that they acquired was halal, what we would term as being halal. But some of the new generation, the way they want money is quick money, and money that is not from halal income, and this then evolves into drug dealing and other bad habits.
You just say then what's actually happened to third, fourth generation Muslims, whether it be Birmingham or even beyond, is that they're merely just moving with the trends of society, because this whole kind of concept of quick money and the not just the drug deal, but the kind of whole kind of millennial craze, quick money, work very little, forget the 9 to 5.
Find a way to make money that is easy, effortless, you look really special doing it at the same time, flamboyance.
Actually, this was done in the 90s as well, because prior to the millennial period, in the 1990s, there was not much difference from my observation of Birmingham. Meaning the bad boy culture, buying certain cars,
wearing certain clothes. If you remember, in those days they had like Boss and Kalkani. By me mentioning Kalkani, that would evoke memories for some people. The spliffy jeans, a type of dress, and then the growth of rap culture and glorifying muharramat, meaning what we term as being those things which are prohibited. If you study the Tavistock Institute and how programming works, one of the methods of programming is popular culture. So what you make popular becomes the culture of that society. So popular culture in the 60s was with the Beatles and LSD and Aldous Huxley writing on his experiences of taking LSD. The whole hippie movement, the hipster movement.
Yes, but Muslims were not in Western society at that time in large numbers. But now we are here in large numbers. Our Muslim youth are adopting that culture also, but it goes down with social programming. So how social programming works in the 90s was with television. Now it's with internet and Facebook and
social media
and other things.
But but back to the whole Birmingham as a city, right? But besides London, it really does shine out in terms of I don't like doing this because I don't want to caricature your city, but the reality is that there's always stuff happening in Birmingham.
And of course, people who live outside of Birmingham will have a very caricaturized opinion of another city, because we're going to base it on two things: the small observations and experiences we have of the city and being there, and whatever's covered on social media, internet, and news. So the reason why we have these kind of like carte blanche opinions of Birmingham or parts of London is because I guess that's the only experience that we have.
Like Sheikh Danyal, a colleague and a friend of yours, issued a video statement about, I think it was last Ramadan, about the stabbings that were taking place in Birmingham, Muslims killing Muslims. That wasn't a norm in the 90s. Like, yes, Muslim gangs for Muslim gangs, but literally there's Muslim shabab killing each other at a very young age. How do you deal with this madness in Birmingham?
Well, certain things we cannot deal with. We have to be honest, meaning if something becomes a social trend, it's very difficult to stop a wave. Meaning if a wave, what the ulama would refer to as fitan, tribulations. And the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told this, that in that time, kun hilsa baytik, be the hills of your house. Hills is the cloth that is placed on the seating area, meaning stay in your house at a time of fitna, tribulation. So one thing that we divorce from our conversations is ashratu sa'a, the signs of the end of times.
Okay.
And how the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam foretold the enviro of the end of times and told us regarding what is occurring now even in Al-Hijaz al-Muqaddas.
Yes.
Meaning the Western...
Yeah, the liberalization reforms, the clubs, the concerts, the Statue of Liberties and all that.
So this again falls into globalization and social programming. So it's not limited to Birmingham, meaning this phenomenon is not limited to Birmingham. It's something observed even in the Muslim heartlands. like you said, in Jeddah, in the city of Jeddah, now we have concerts, which was unthought of in previous times. So we are at the ala washki dhuhur al-mahdi, meaning the threshold at the appearance of the ashrat, the major ashratu sa'a. The major ashratu sa'a, 10 signs, but the signs that occur before. So
the minor signs.
Meaning we are the threshold.
The major are 10, no, Sheikh?
Yes, so we're at the threshold of those major signs. The threshold, meaning all the majority of the minor signs have occurred. The hadith states, أَنْتَرَ الْعُرَاةَ الْحُفَاةَ رِعَاءَ الشَّائِيَ تَطَاوَلُونَ فِي الْبُنْيَانِ. You shall observe the naked, barefoot, destitute, poor people competing in building, constructing tall buildings. The tallest building is in UAE, and now in Saudi Arabia.
They're competing
to construct a building taller than the one in UAE. So globalization has led to, meaning an centralized American culture being exported throughout the world, and the stabbings are just a consequence of social engineering.
So you're saying that the capitalist world order, and that's essentially what it is, isn't it? It's a capitalist, secular, liberal world order, and you're saying that things like stabbings and gang violence and substance abuse is an inevitable outcome of that system.
One thing the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam foretold is kathratul haraj, and they said, the companion said, what meaning kathratul haraj, meaning excessive haraj. So they said, what is haraj? Meaning it was an Ethiopian word. And the Messenger, because in Arabic there's no word that describes it, this phenomenon, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said kathratul qatl, the excessive killing and mindless killing. Mindless killing is one of the signs of ashratu sa'a. And within the ashratu sa'a,
the one who's killing and the one who's being killed does not know.
They do not know why they are being killed. So kathratul harj is what we are observing not only in the city of Birmingham. Let's talk about Asham in Syria, meaning mindless killing in Syria, mindless killing in Egypt. What occurred with Abdul Fattah Sisi killing the Muslim Brotherhood, anyone associated with the Muslim Brotherhood. But additional to that, even in the 1960s, from the time of Suharto, General Suharto, he was backed by the American CIA, and the estimated number of people who were killed is 1 million, meaning more than 1 million people killed just because of their affiliations with the Communist Party. And even at that time, so-called Islamic groups were utilized by the government when it suited them. And this is what occurs now. And this is something that young people should be aware of, meaning where someone sincere to Islam can be manipulated by a political agenda of another group.
Do you think that's, do you think to some degree that may have taken place, I don't know, let's say in Syria?
Yes. And this is what many of the ulama who were against the revolution warned against, meaning manipulation. Manipulation of foreign groups or foreign organizations or foreign intelligence services manipulating the people of Syria. Why? Because the idea is to evacuate Syria. And this is why why would Germany accept so many Syrian refugees? Germany, the same country that was responsible for human rights abuses against the Jews and many others, that country now hosts Syrians, meaning there is a reason for that. That reason could be emptying Syria of Syrians and allowing an expansion of Israel. Meaning greater Israel is something.
Yeah, that's the plans for greater Israel to go into Transjordan and go well into even the Sinai and into Mossad is a known thing. They want to basically rebuild the old the Jewish state that existed during the prophets of Bani Israel.
One thing that a friend of mine, an old friend who passed away now, his name was Sidi Ayman Ahwal. He was an Englishman who accepted Islam well over 40 years ago. In the 1970s, he accepted Islam. He went to Palestine, and when he went to Palestine, he met a priest who was an Englishman also. So he said to the priest, "Have you succeeded in converting any Palestinian to Christianity?" The priest said, "We do not come here to convert them." He said, "Why do you come here?" He said, "We come here to give them hammers." He said, "What do you mean giving them hammers?" He said, "To fight one another." So exploitation, like in Iraq, exploitation of the Sunni Shia division, political exploitation. Additional to that, the infighting in Syria, exploitation of the groups of people who went to Syria as well as the Syrian population, exploitation of Muslims in other places, meaning disintegrating the political unity of the Muslim world. So that's something, meaning we've gone away from stabbings.
No, that's fine. And we'll get to the state of the Ummah towards later on in the podcast. But essentially, just so we can close it for now until we revisit it. Basically, what you're essentially saying is it's the old colonial divide and rule policy, isn't it? To access Muslim lands and regions and cause division and discord to then make it easy to advance certain agendas.
Let me make something clear. Any problems that we face in the Muslim world, whether in Birmingham as a microcosm or the rest of the world as a macro problem, we are responsible. We do not lay the blame on any other group, because the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, "An tada'a alaykum al-ummam," the nations shall call the way someone is called on a platter of food. And the companions asked, "What is the reason?" And the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, "Hubbu dunya," love of the world is one, and a dislike for
the hereafter or death,
meaning the hereafter. And the other thing that is mentioned in the hadith is al-wahan, meaning the description of love of the world and the description of a dislike for the hereafter, meaning a dislike to meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is described in the one word as al-wahan. So al-wahan, as long as there is wahan, we will have stabbings, meaning the essential root of the problem is spiritual. And this is the essential root of our political, economic, military problems is spiritual. Al-wahan only happens because of a weakness of iman, a weakness of faith. And a weakness of faith is because of a lack of understanding of our faith, meaning a rational problem, but as well as a spiritual problem. But the rational problem again goes back to social programming, how we are raised, what type of environment we live in, what is placed in our minds. And this is where popular culture and all this these different things associated with not only the Tavistock Institute, but so many different social engineering programs that are occurring and have occurred in the past.
I was getting worried because you pointed at the Blood Brothers, and I was like, oh God, I hope we don't fall under that popular culture.
No, it's a good logo.
It was a good logo. But Shaykh, you said something that we are to blame, yeah? Are you now saying we are to blame from the perspective that there is a spiritual crisis within the Ummah, which is then making us susceptible and vulnerable to kind of just take things which are haram, whether they be ideologies and lifestyles? Or are you saying that because of our sins we are in the situation that we're in? Which is it? Or are they the two same thing?
There's two scenarios here. Firstly, in places where America has left depleted uranium, like Iraq in the 1990s, and young children are born deformed, and more or less a nuclear war was waged against Iraq with depleted uranium and so many different things. Those people are in ibtila, meaning tribulation. We do not blame them. I'm talking about people like us who are in afia, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not placed us in such situations. People who are living, I've heard some preachers, they preach strongly against Muslims living in places like Iraq. It's very easy to do that on a platform where you are yourself in a state of well-being.
Yes, that's what I was referring to. I've heard some ulama say that our sisters being raped and killed in Syria, and what's happening in Palestine is because the safs of Fajr is not full, or is because Fulan and Fulan has not kept his fast, and because we are a rebellious people here,
we're a sinful people
here, and therefore those things are happening to our brothers and sisters elsewhere.
No, we cannot judge the situation of the people in those countries. Meaning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only knows what is the reality of the people of those countries. We have to judge our own situation. So I would only talk about Birmingham myself, starting with myself, is that generally, or specifically to myself, I must make tawbah, I must make amends, and then people around me encourage them to make tawbah. But as for situations in Iraq or situations in Syria,
Palestine, Kashmir,
meaning those are universal problems of the Muslim world. Of course, the wahan is a universal problem. Wahan. No doubt, if the Muslim leadership, from scholars to political leaders, did not have wahan in their hearts, they would be politically stronger in order to resist globalization today. There is no doubt in that. So the tawbah starts from the leadership, meaning the scholars should start with themselves rather than being judgmental regarding people in Gaza. In fact, people in Gaza are the most rewarded people on the face of the earth today, alongside with the people of Al-Quds. The hadith states, لا تزال طائفة من أمتي يقاتلون في سبيل الله, that a group of people shall not cease fighting in the way of Allah. In one narration, it mentioned وَهُمْ عَلَى أَبْوَابِ الْقُدْسِ, they are surrounding the doors of Al-Quds. It's the people of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa and the surrounding areas which we observe today. Meaning the hadith is true.
Birmingham Madness, there was a lecture which you gave, I believe 2 years ago. 5 Pillars reshared it recently. It was about the issue of janaza and drug dealers. Now, there was a misconception that you were saying, like when I watched that, do you know which segment I'm talking about?
I know the issue.
It was an 8 to 9 minute segment from a wider talk where you spoke about imams and faith leaders, discouraging them from attending the janaza prayers. You weren't saying, if I'm correct, you weren't saying you can't pray janaza prayers. It was a specific message to ulama and imams. Can you clarify?
Yes, there's communally, there's an issue where leaders in the community glorify anyone who has excessive wealth and is able to use force and violence on people. There is a respectability that they give those type of people, and this filters down to what we would call ostensibly religious people. So if a person who is violent and a person who sells drugs in the community
intimidates people, can use force.
If he enters a masjid, there are old people in their 70s who would stand up out of respect for him. So when one of them dies, there is a glorification of his death, and this glorifying that is one of the reasons why we are being punished in different ways. There is in Al-Quran Al-Kareem, meaning Sunanullahi fil Kawn, is the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the universe. There is a way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punishes a people by them fighting one another. So some of those ulama who may be mentioning what's happening and occurring in Syria may be referring to that. Meaning, an example of this, Abdul Ra'uf al-Munawi rahimahullah, in his book Faydul Qadir, he mentions his commentary on Al-Jami' al-Saghir of Imam Suyuti. He mentions that when the had is not carried out for zina, adultery, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down, meaning creates within the people or sends amongst the people shayateen that then sow discord amongst them that leads to killing, mass killing. This effect is mentioned in hadith Meaning, if someone doesn't give zakatul amwal, in one hadith in the Tabarani, the hadith states, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala withholds the rain from the people, which causes famine. So a famine in a country could sometimes be due to the fact that the Muslims of that country are not paying their zakatul amwal.
So with regards to, let's say, we're not talking about the small time drug dealers. We're talking about the big boys, yeah, who have massive reputations. Their families or their tribes are also interlinked with masajid. We know this exists up and down the country.
Dynasties.
They're like dynasties, right? Where some of the men folk would be involved in masajid in committees, and then the sons or the uncles from the same family are renowned big drug dealers, right? So when in that 8 to 9 segment lecture that you gave, you made a comparison to arm dealers. Do you recall what I'm talking about? And so there's two things I want to ask you. Why did you make that comparison to arm dealers? And number two, is there any record of the Prophet ﷺ avoiding certain janazah prayers due to who it was? I heard there was a narration that he used to avoid the janazah prayers of people who had debt. Have you heard that?
So there is a narration the Prophet ﷺ would ask regarding people, does he have a debt? Because that involves huququl ibad, the rights of people. Now my experience living in Birmingham, because you mentioned Birmingham specifically, in 1997, when I was 13 years old, 1997, I went to a masjid, and in the masjid there was a man in the hallway selling books, and a young man came in and he took £10 from him, and he said, I need this money to phone a taxi and pay for a taxi, and I will give you the money. So the man who was on the bookstall, he went with the young man to phone the taxi, and I just followed to observe. So this was on the same road. The young man phoned someone and then waited, and a car parked up, and a Muslim, meaning someone who appeared Muslim, in the sense, what I mean by that is
he looked like any other.
He's an Asian.
Asian.
He's an Apna, yeah.
He parked up. The young man gave him £10, and he took some packet of what they call brown heroin. And he went back in the telephone box, and he took a piece of foil out. In those days, the Kit Kat chocolate would have a foil. I think they stopped that because of this. Drug addicts would buy Kit Kat chocolate because of the foil, and he placed the brown on the foil. And then when the bookstore man, when he attempted to open the phone, the young man would become violent. So this was £10 of that person spent on drugs. When I went back home and I informed my father regarding this experience, so this is a common experience of growing up in Birmingham. My father said to me that these drug addicts, they would even sell their mother's own gold.
We know this happened. We know of brothers locally who have robbed money from their own mothers.
Exactly. So the comparison to arms dealers, of drug dealers, is because they break up families. They destroy families. So the number of stories that have come my way from my childhood is saddening stories.
We know these stories.
The comparison was based on that.
Sure. And you know, just to some clarity, is there an established opinion amongst at least the Hanafi school where big mujrimeen, like big criminals, like highway robbers, those who do armed robbery and things like that, can imams avoid their janazah prayers? Not praying, like if they're Muslim and they're major criminals.
And would you advocate against it actually publicly?
In Maraq al-Falah, one of the works of fiqh, they mention a person who dies while showing silah. Silah is a weapon. A shahir bi silah, meaning someone who died in the process of showing his weapon and attempting to kill people. If he dies like this, his janazah is avoided. So based upon this juzi, meaning this specific ruling, you can analyze different rulings where someone who falls into that category people of influence should avoid their funerals because they are mufsiduna fil ard, cause corruption in the earth. And drug dealers do cause corruption in the earth. Muslim scholars should not glorify drug dealers, or meaning, I'll give you an example. If someone has an organization, an Islamic organization or a group, and a person of influence who is a drug dealer joins that group, it's glorified without that person doing tawbah.
The tawbah is a condition, of course.
Imam
It should be a
Ahmad
condition.
Zarruq, rahimahullah, one of the Sufi guides, he has a book on meaning authentic Sufism. He mentions one of the criticisms of some of the shuyukh of his time, saying that they would accept as students people who the shuyukh knew that they have not repented from their ways. This is a criticism.
So they live double lives, kind of.
Yes, so they join an Islamic group in that time, the tariqah, meaning they join a Sufi order. But in today's comparison would be not only Sufi orders, any organization, and the leadership would know that this person has not repented of his sins. He continuously does those sins, and they do not make them repent either.
SubhanAllah. Staying on the theme of Birmingham, right, and kind of trying to revisit some of your earlier years, you came to prominence, at least in the online sphere, beyond Birmingham, with some very, what do I say? I wouldn't say controversial, but very well-known debates, or your involvement in certain exchanges with scholars from other backgrounds, namely the Salafis. So you had Sheikh Murtaza Khan, and then there was Sheikh something Damashq. What was his name?
Abdurrahman
Damashq. So you
from Lebanon.
From Lebanon. So you came, and how young were you then? You were very...
To tell the truth, my first famous interview was on the BBC.
About the army?
On the British Army.
On the British Army.
Where I said it's prohibited for Muslims to join the British Army.
But the more debating aspect of you, because you, if you go up and down the country and you say Shaykh Asrar Rashid, the first thing is Shaykh Asrar Rashid, who debated, besides the other great works that you've done, mashallah, may Allah accept it from you, but there's the debates, it was something which
it's a you're like a pay-per-view attraction.
Well, that happened that happened growing up in the 90s, because in the 90s you had a growth of Madkhali, meaning Rabi al-Madkhali, from
it's a particular strand of Salafi thinking,
Saudi Arabia, former Ikhwani. Former Ikhwani. And the only reason why he left the Ikhwan was because after Juhayman al-Utaybi
took
up
Kaaba.
arms and meaning he took up arms and
he hijacked the Kaaba, didn't he?
Meaning the Masjid al-Haram, and in 1979. So after that, Rabi al-Madkhali moved away from the Ikhwan or the Qutbi way ideology, and then he moved towards a pro-government way of thinking. So in the 90s there was an influx of Salafism in Birmingham at that time, and I'm telling you why this led me to debating Salafis. You had the translation of the Prophet's prayer described by Usama Hassan.
Oh yes, that was very well known.
Then you also had Ihsan Ilahi Zahir's book, The Brelvis, published in Pakistan before the glossy edition. And then you had Bilal Phillips' book, Monotheism.
Yes.
And you had meaning an excess of literature that was published in the 1990s for the English-speaking Muslims, because our forefathers, our grandparents were not conversant or didn't read English. My grandfather fought in World War II, but the most he knew was the orders he would take from the British officers. So we were from the first generation that was conversant in English. So this was the first type of literature that young people were exposed to at that time. But there was not only literature being published in the 1990s, there was also ardent Salafis, pseudo-Salafis, going around to variant masajid and questioning young people who were worshippers. Meaning, I prayed from a young age. I didn't have a conversion story. So from a young age, I've been praying. My parents made me pray, and we've had a religious family in terms of prayer and other things. So when I would attend the masajid to pray, at the back of the masjid, and I was in 1996, I went to Islamabad with my father, and my father took me to Ziaul Haq's grave.
The general.
Just read Fatiha for his soul. He just said, look, this is Ziaul Haq. Even though my father wasn't pro Ziaul Haq, he just show me different places. And he took me to...
But Ziaul Haq did have a very important role in Islamizing the Pakistani army.
Yes, so my father just took me to his grave and to some other graves of some of the people buried around Faisal Masjid in Islamabad. And when we went to Faisal Masjid, they had a bookshop. So I'm talking 13 years old, because when I look back now, children of that age need to be inspired. So my father said, buy any book you want. So I bought a book on the Battle of Badr. I bought a book on Doomsday.
Smashed it.
A book on a few books. Read those books. I would go to, in Birmingham, I would go to Paigham-e Islam Trust, which is a Jamaat-e Islami bookshop. But the person running the bookshop was a Sufi. But he wasn't Jamaat-e Islami himself. And he would have Sufi literature and political literature. So at the same time, the Salafis were approaching us. So I would sometimes go to the masjid to pray. And at the end of the prayer, some of the young Salafis who, funnily enough, I meet them now.
They've changed?
They've changed. They've toned down, meaning their rhetoric has toned down. But they would stop me. And at that time, I was memorizing Quran in our local masjid. So they would say to me, you are memorizing Quran? I would say yes. So they would say to me, recite this surah.
Just randomly?
Randomly, just to test my knowledge. So I would recite the surah. So at one point, I forgot to say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. So they condemned me harshly for that.
How old were you then?
12 or 13 in 1997 this started. So I went Pakistan in 96. Basic understanding of Islam. Meaning the standard, if you remember Ghulam Sarwar's book.
Yes, of course, standard.
Having read that, studied that, basic understanding of Islam. Being from Kashmir, Sufi background. So my father took me to Bawa Shadi Shahid's Mazar. We didn't do any shirk. There was no circumambulation. There was no kissing of the grave.
Did you ever go to Qadi Sharif?
No. Okay. We went to Bawa Shadi Shahid, which is in Pimbar.
Okay.
So, meaning a simple understanding of Islam, you go to Data Darbar. We didn't ask help from the dead as they claim. Meaning you do Fatiha and you go. It's a historical place. Ali al-Juwairi, rahimahullah, contemporary of the author of Risalatul Qushayriya, meaning a grave from 900 years in that region. Nevertheless, the point being that this was my first exposure to pseudo-Salafism. So when they would approach me, they would ask, Ain Allah? Where is Allah?
Oh God.
And I would say, what do you mean, Ain Allah? 13 years old. Seeking help from the dead is haram, shirk. I said, we don't seek help from the dead. Meaning, we seek help from Allah.
13-year-old Shaykh thinking, what's this guy talking about?
You must recite Al-Fatiha behind the Imam.
That's a fiqhy one, that is.
They were so stringent in that time. I know Green Lane Masjid has changed their stance recently. But at that time, Green Lane and Wright Street. So Wright Street in Madkhali.
That's the Abu Khadija guys, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So and I had discussions with Abu Khadija as a child.
Really?
Yes. He may not remember, but I will. You've evoked memories, so I'll mention them.
Yeah,
to you.
Please do.
So so they would all go to Green Lane at that time. So you had an amalgamation of the Green Lane. Which is a broader Salafism.
Yeah. Because just for our viewers, basically there was a Just for our viewers from the UK, because we have a lot of viewers from the States. In the 90s, there was a surge of Salafi dawah in the UK, as well as dawah from other organisations. I mean, Hizb ut-Tahrir was very prominent in the 90s as well. I mean, they're still very active. But then there was a split which was as a result of the first Gulf War. And I think that's when the split emerged amongst the Salafis. Those who kind of sided with the pro-government agenda, which was like the Madkhalis, and then there were those who kind of disagreed with the fact that the Saudi government had invited American soldiers to the Haram. And that's where the kind of split happened. But the period you're talking about, I think that was before the split even happened, I think.
Well, the split was under the surface at the time.
Okay.
But they worked together. So they gave me, at that time, how they approached me was like this.
Yeah.
And I went to our local masjid.
Yeah.
And the Shaykh, who's passed away, rahimahullah, was a Naqshbandi Shaykh from Pakistan, from Sialkot.
Yeah.
I said to him, why do we recite Fatiha behind the Imam? Why do we say Amin bil Jahar, meaning Amin loudly? He gave me his answers. But at that time, it wasn't sufficient. So the traditional ulama were unprepared for this assault. Meaning many of the converts to Salafism you have today converted in that period.
Because the 90s, Shaykh, I mean, we spoke about this a number of times whenever we meet. The 90s was a key period because prior to the 90s, the demographic majority of UK Muslims was Indo-Pak Bangladeshi. And it was either you came from families that were either Barelvi background or Deobandi background. And that was essentially what... Do you think that's a correct generalization?
That's correct.
So 90s was the first time that sons from that generation, the third generation Muslims, were now kind of rebelling against what their forefathers...
So they would have simple dalil like Mawlid is haram. How do you know it's haram? Saudi does not do Mawlid. Saudi is the cradle of Islam. Or even though that term is incorrect, because Islam predates.
Of course,
meaning it's from Adam alayhi salam.
Of course.
Meaning the Quran was revealed in Makkah al-Mukarramah, so therefore they don't do Mawlid. So this was the level of reasoning people had. But of course the arguments, partly due to my contributions as well, have become more sophisticated now. But what happened in that period of time, they would approach me with these questions, and then what they started to do is giving me free literature. And I really thank them, because they gave me the book The Barelvis.
Oh, that was an infamous book.
In our household, we knew a Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani.
Yeah, that one.
So a Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani we knew. So I would say to my mother, why do we do Yarmi? My mother said, we do this because a Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani did it. Simple answer. But then when they gave me the book The Barelvis, I was exposed to Al-Imam Ahmad Rida Khan. Meaning,
Prior to that, you didn't know who he was?
prior to that, people had a basic understanding. Meaning they knew, not everyone, meaning there were families who were very familiar with him. But there was no zealous movement around Al-Imam Ahmad Rida Khan. But they gave me the book, and really when I think back, between the ages of 13 and 14, so I was moving on to 14, 97 and 98, that period of time, I read the Barelvis, that book by Ihsan Ilahi Zahir. I got familiar with Ismail al-Dahlawi, and I acquired 1 or 2 volumes of Fatawa Ridwiya just to check what type of book is this, even though my Urdu was weak and I could not read Arabic at the time. Then they gave me also the Usul al-Sunnah of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal in English. They still have the same edition.
These are famous Salafi Dar al-Salam books, they are.
So Barbahari's Creed, in fact Salafi publication.
Salafi publication, that's it.
So Barbahari's Creed is translated by Talha Dawood Burbank.
Yes.
Passed away now.
Yeah.
I was at his funeral in Al-Masjid al-Haram when he died. Sadly, he died. His coach blew up and he died in a fire. And when I was in the Haram, Al-Masjid al-Haram, they prayed his funeral at that time. But anyhow, that was in 2010 or 2009 in the Hajj. But in that time, they gave me his translation of Barbahari's Creed. And they gave me Albani's work, Tawassul, Anwa'u wa Ahkamu, its types and its rulings. They gave me this book. Now when I think back, at the age of 13, reading all of this literature, I also read the counter literature
provided by...
So at that time, the Sunni movements did not have much literature. They had very basic counters. So Gongol Sharif at that time, they published Satanic Scholars, which was like a book, a simple pamphlet published against
the Salafis, yeah?
The Salafis and the Ubandis. Okay. And then they had Raza Academy.
Blood Brothers.
Stockport, there was a Raza Academy. They had books published. And I would go to GN printers. People in Birmingham would know these places. And I would buy Raza Academy books and read them. Now when I think back, very basic literature. This was in around 97. And I would also go to the Paigham Islam Trust, the bookshop. The person who ran the bookshop was a Sunni, and he would provide Sufi literature. So you had a Sunnah foundation of a Sheikh Hisham Kabani publishing responses to the Salafis at that time. I would read all of that literature, and whatever I would get my hands on, I would read. At that time, the local imam gifted me Ahmad Didat's book, The Choice.
Okay.
So The Choice, that's going on to it, but why I went into debating. So when he gave me The Choice, I read all of The Choice. Volume 1 was at that time. They had Ahmad Didat's number in the inside cover. So in those days, landlines, if you remember landlines.
Yeah, of course.
Nowadays, people very rarely have landlines. I picked up the house phone and I rang South Africa. My parents didn't know. They may have wondered after why the bill was high. But I rang, and Yusuf Didat picked up, and he said, my father is listening to you now. And I said, I've read your book and I'm very appreciative of your book. And his father listened to my entire conversation. Then in that time, that inspired me to go to the churches and debate the Christians. So there's in Sparkbrook, there's a Jehovah's Witness Center on Main Street. The main Jehovah's Witness Center in the entire Birmingham. And I would go there regularly with the Bible. And remember, I was 14 at the time.
You were doing this at 14?
At 14. And the combat kit came out in that year. So Ahmad Didat's combat kit, volume 2 of The Choice came out. There was a revert brother at the time who gave me the volume 2. And I read the entire volume. I went to IPCI on Coventry Road. My father would take me sometimes, and I bought all of Ahmad Didat's literature, everything. Even though they should give it out free at that time, they would price it 5p, 10p. I bought all of that literature and read. So regularly I would go to IPCI and to Paigham Islam Trust to buy books. But the interactions with the Salafis increased because they would take me to Green Lane. So I would go to Green Lane, and
as brothers from the Salafi background would take you to Green Lane,
and then in an attempt to convert me.
Okay.
This was an attempt to convert me. So they would tell me Allah is in a direction. The dalil they would present is when Fir'aun addressed Haman. He said, "Build me a tower that I may go and look at the Lord of Musa." Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being contained in a location or by time and space.
But now they say he is on his arsh, right?
They would say that then as well.
Oh, really? Okay.
But that was one of the...
But one of the ones he used the example of Fir'aun, yeah?
That is one of the examples they in fact use in the literature as well.
Allah.
So I would go to regularly, they would take me. And the first thing they wanted to change was the way I prayed.
Okay, so they want Rafi Yadain, they want...
Why? Because once you change the way you pray...
Visibly different,
your mentality will change, and the way you dress. So I would dress in the traditional salwar kameez, Pakistani style salwar kameez, or shirt and trousers. But the way they would dress is they would have their trousers really high above the ankles.
And thobe.
A thobe. In those days, Dr. Martens were very common amongst them for some reason.
Big boots.
Now they've moved on to trainers.
Yeah. Basically, is this kind of military look? Was it like a
semi-military look? And a mindset. So they had many attempts.
One thing, did you ever wear dhoti? Did you wear lungi?
Yes, a dhoti is a lungi or a waist strap is a part of our culture.
Good.
My grandfather would wear that, and I wear it now even around the house.
Wicked.
Yeah.
So
Just wanted to get that.
just when you're relaxed around the house,
Chilling,
but
yeah.
not outside because
Okay.
it's too cold in this country to wear one. So they sent me to Abu Khadija. They said he will answer your question.
Level 2.
Level 2.
I went to Abu Khadija. He's sitting down. He wouldn't remember this, but he said to me, "You can't say Ya Rasulallah. It's shirk to say such." I said, "It's in Al-Adab al-Mufrad of Imam al-Bukhari." Now, I've read this. He said, if this is found in Al-Adab al-Mufrad of Imam al-Bukhari, I will become a Brelvi. Now, at the time, I didn't have Al-Adab al-Mufrad. So I went and acquired Al-Adab al-Mufrad.
And the citation is there?
The citation is there. Meaning, Al-Imam Bukhari has a book on mannerisms, and he has the dua to recite when someone's leg falls asleep. And the dua is to say, Ya Muhammada. Famous citation. Ibn Sunni mentions this also. Even Ibn Taymiyyah cites this. So that is found in Al-Adab al-Mufrad. But I never got down to finding Abu Khadija ever again. But at the time, I didn't realize this is Abu Khadija or who he is. So this was my experience in the 90s. Additional to that, people were circulating cassettes. Remember the TDK cassettes?
Old school.
Shaykh Faisal. Now, Shaykh Faisal
Al-Jamaici.
Shaykh Asrar Rashid. Yeah, God.
He was a different brand of Salafism, and those tapes, when you listen to them, he would say things like, there are only 5 million Muslims in the world. Why? He would say, the Shia al-Kuffar, all disbelievers, the Sufis are al-Kuffar, the Barelvis are al-Kuffar, the Deobandis are al-Kuffar. He would say, the Saudi Salafis. This is where I realized that there's a distinction between Madkhalis and...
When you got to that stage.
So the Saudi Salafis are kuffar. So how many Muslims are there with our way of thinking? He said this in a lecture. Only 5 million Muslims in the entire world.
You remember this was famous?
No,
It was unbelievably famous.
yeah, but Shaykh Faisal al-Jami was known as a takfirinator.
Yeah, he was.
I mean, look, he's also got very famous debates in West Indies against the Christians, but he was very well known for those kind of
So that was the enviro of Birmingham, and then you had Birmingham Central Mosque, Belgrave Road Masjid. At that time, you had... So, as a person who wandered everywhere to see what happened, remember I would go school, I was in secondary school at the time. So we would go to Belgrave Road Masjid to pray. And when we would go to pray, you had the students of Riyadul Haq conducting circles there at that time. So he was having his run-ins with the Salafis, and then you had Hizb ut-Tahrir holding their circles at the back of the masjid. So as a child, I would go and sit in the circles to hear both sides.
different circles.
Different circles. To hear. So I would listen to the Hizb ut-Tahrir, and they would stick to one subject, Khilafa. And then I would sit in the Riyadul Haq circles just to see what he discusses. So that was my introduction to Deobandis, meaning the first interaction I had with Deobandis was with the circle of Riyadul Haq. Then the Shia, there was initially I read the work of Ihsan Ilahi Zahir, which again, he's not a reliable source, but that exposed me to some of the local Shia, and we had basic debates with them, and this spurred me into some of the early theological debates. This is of course prior to studying, just at the age of 13 and 14.
So it sounds like you had an insane early teens, right? Like literally you were in
This is just 13, 14 we're touching. We haven't even got to like 16, 17.
Okay, so 13, 14, when did you actually then begin formal studying?
Well, my first exposure, you know the Sultan Bahut Trust Masjid?
Yes.
In Birmingham?
Yes.
What great work they did in the 90s is that they would bring scholars from Pakistan to teach in the trust. So they brought my first teacher, Allama Rasul Bakh Saidi, who's from Lahore. He's a Multani, studied in Lahore and Islamabad University. He would conduct circles at the side of the masjid. So you know of Saqib Shami?
Yes.
He would attend those circles, and other people now who are prominent people, meaning they
attended those circles.
So they introduced me to him, saying that, look, if you need your answers, you need to study in a traditional method. So when I would walk past, he would teach works like Usul al-Shashi, but the old lithographic editions, the Pakistani editions. So I would look at those editions and think, when would I be able to understand? Meaning, Usul al-Shashi is a book on legal theory.
Yeah.
You had some students who were in that class who were inspired by Hamza Yusuf, who had studied in Mauritania. So Sheikh Hamza Yusuf at that time was inspiring a certain segment of youth into studying Ajurumiyya, studying traditional Arabic, and but at the same time there were people who were from our traditional background who were just going to traditional, what we call Desi scholars, and studying.
But you went to Syria, right?
Later.
Yeah. How later?
A few years later, meaning when I went, initially I went at the age of 17 for a visit. Just for a visit for 2 weeks. And then the next year I traveled to Syria for studying Arabic.
How come you didn't go to Al-Azhar like many do? How come you chose
In Birmingham there was a trend to go to Syria. The reason being, our teacher went to the Sultan Trust commission the teacher, meaning Allama Rasul Bakh Saidi, to choose from either Azhar or Syria. Now he had studied in Azhar, so he went to Syria to check how Syria is like, Damascus. There he met the son of Shaykh Salih Farfur rahimullah, who's a student of Imam Badruddin al-Hassani, who fought the French
for the French
occupation, and was Izzuddin Qassam's teacher.
Yes.
So Sheikh Salih Farfur's son, Husamuddin Farfur, became a good friend of our teacher. And when Sheikh Saidi went around Damascus, he found Damascus to be the right environment spiritually, as well as the studies in Damascus are not as institutionalized. Contrary to what people think, because of the propaganda against the Assad regime, the ulama are not as institutionalized, meaning what the regime requires from them is a license. They acquire a license from the awqaf, not even from the regime, from the awqaf, the endowments. And the awqaf, the head of the awqaf is a scholar, and they give them a license, and then they sit in the masjid and teach traditional books. Meaning, unlike other places where the government will overlook what is being taught, there the scholars were more free to teach. And Rasul Bakh Saidi says he went to one of the gatherings, and they were giving out milk, and they would say, Ishrabu al-halib wa sallu ala al-habib, which means drink milk and recite salawat on the beloved. This one is heart over, meaning the environment of Syria with the spiritual Sufi inclination of the ulama, but as well as the ulama being learned. For instance, a distinction between Egypt and Syria. In Syria, if you study Quran under a teacher, he will not take a penny from you. In Azhar, they take money. In Syria, if you study religious studies with scholars, ulama, they teach for free in the masjid. Meaning the ulama of Sham, they are renowned for their taqwa, piety. So there was a trend in the 90s of people going from Birmingham to Syria. Okay. Many students went to Syria. And that trend was, one of the people who started this was Allama Rasul Bakh Saidi, but there were others, like the murids of Sheikh Nazim al-Haqqani. They would also go to Syria because their sheikh would recommend for them to go to Syria.
So, look, I mean, did you actually, so the debates, right? Okay, so you were exposed to kind of exchanges with different groups, namely the Salafis, as well as other groups in Birmingham.
Including non-Muslims.
Including the Christians as well. You said Christians as well. But in terms of intra-Muslim debates, right? Do you, because I properly first formally met you when I chaired the debate between yourself and Ustad Abdul Rahman Hassan on Istighatha, right? And since then, there's also been an attempt at you exchanging with the individual called Ajmal Naheem, known as Mufti Abu Layth. And then there was even when Naqshwani, the Shia figure Naqshwani, insulted Abu Bakr radiallahu anh and others. So you're still on it. Do you feel that there is a place for intra-Muslim debates?
Yes, but the only problem I find is that the other Muslims who I've debated have not kept the level of decorum that I have attempted to keep. The decorum I kept was to raise a standard, and I even said to Naim Ajmal that if I debated an atheist could dialogue better than the way he was dialoguing with me. And I've demonstrated this, meaning I've had debates with atheists. The atheists have demonstrated better mannerisms, less emotion, and a more objective approach to the debate.
But wouldn't you say that's because there's no real sectarianism, historical sectarianism between us and the atheist? Even though the atheists as a world order are trying to diminish our faith, the intra-Muslim debates have historical roots in the Indian subcontinent or in the Arab world. Between
what the Shaykh is talking about is etiquette and mannerism and having control.
But there's also been, historically, Muslims have engaged with atheists, mulhideen, from the time of the famous Mu'tazili debates with the atheists and the Asharis.
Yes.
And then from Imam Ghazali. My early exposure, by the way, to Imam Ghazali was at that time also. Because I read his...
the 13-14 period or the Syria period?
No, in 13-14, because William Maya, I think, the translation was of the deliverance from error, meaning al-munqidh min ad-dalal. So I read that work at that time. So Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah, he engaged with atheists. And there has been a historical precedence with atheists. But what Muslims need to maintain in, like for instance, Naqshbandi now insulting Sayyiduna Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu is uncalled for. Additional to that, with Naim Ajmal making a mockery of the religious tenets. Additional to that,
fundamentals.
Yes, fundamentals. So there is an essential need for decorum and good manners when having intra-Muslim debates.
But you still maintain that there is a space and a need for it.
Of course, because let's say a Muslim is inspired by Naqshbandi.
Yeah.
And that Muslim adopts the position of insulting Sayyiduna Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. That would be totally unacceptable. So how do you disarm that youngster from that belief? The only way is engagement, and engagement is debate.
Okay, let's put Naqshbandi and the Shia aside, right? Let's put them aside. Sunni Muslim debates, those who identify as Sunni, Salafis, Deobandis, Barelvi, Sufi, Ash'ari, Maturidi, Athari, other. No, it's rarely between madahib, because I find that those who are from the people of the madahib, they're cool.
But if you're broadly speaking, you would include that.
But the debates are nearly always theological. Am I correct, Sheikh? You will never have fiqh debates like back to time.
I would avoid subsidiary debates, furu' debates, because even though early exposure was just about raful yadayn, raising the hands in prayer, placing where you place your hands in prayer, Ameen bil jahr. But
istighatha, tawassul, mawlid, these kind of things, the veneration, the alleged veneration of saints and all these kind of things.
If the stance that the opposing group take reaches where their claim is that their position would negate our iman, then it's essential for us to debate and
because
engage with them.
Because it's an issue of what belief and disbelief.
Yes.
Okay. Because I remember
even when I met you at the Tawassul debate,
I remember one of the first things you actually mentioned to Abdul Rahman Hassan, was, are you saying that this matter is haram or kufr? Do you remember?
Yes.
You said
if you say it's just haram, we wouldn't have this debate.
Yeah. But
because he said it's kufr, we're having a debate to disprove the fact that this is kufr, because that would become essential upon us to disprove. So one thing, by having gone Syria, from the experience in Birmingham and then going Syria to Damascus, where in all of Damascus there was not a single Salafi masjid. They had a Shia, what they call Imam Bara in Urdu, Shia masjid, but that was in a certain area. But the entire Damascus only had traditional Sunni masajid and Sunni imams.
Did you have any masajid?
You did have Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Arnaout, because there will be people trying to contradict me. Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Arnaout, the muhaqqiq of Jami al-Usul, he was a Salafi, but from a more traditional background. Nasiruddin al-Albani also came from Damascus.
So when you were in Syria, did you find masajid that were, let's say, influenced by the Muslim Brotherhood? Or did you ever meet ulama?
No one was overtly with the Brotherhood. If they were associated with the Brotherhood, it was not overtly said. I had heard from scholars that I studied with that Fulan Sheikh is Ikhwani. But none of the scholars were overtly with the Brotherhood or with Hizb ut-Tahrir or with any group. They would teach traditional Islam and not express any association with any group.
Have you found from your experience with those particular political movements, the Hizb ut-Tahrir and Ikhwan al-Muslimin, that amongst their members that they are far more fluid with regards to the kind of schools that they may learn under, or some of the beliefs that they may adopt, meaning that as political movements and parties, that they are not restricted to, let's say, certain theological standpoints like the Salafi movement? Have you found this?
They would have to be, because in order to attain political dominance, you would have to appease so many different groups.
Yeah, I guess
meaning as political groups, they would have to do that.
Yeah.
But personally, the shuyukh I studied with were not associated with any of those groups. And personally, I've never been associated with any of those groups. So I would look at them objectively. So whatever good I see, I would point out.
But you've never debated them, So
we did debate them. Yes, let me tell you about my engagements with Hizb ut-Tahrir.
Yeah.
So the people of Hizb ut-Tahrir who would sit at the back of the masjid, they were not aggressive. But when Umar Bakri
entered the scene,
entered the scene in the late 90s, if you remember. He initially took a traditional stance towards Sunni Islam, he claimed to have good ties with the author of Al-Jihad wal-Qital.
Who wrote that?
Haykal.
Yeah.
Yes. Now Haykal is from Jami'a bin Nur in Damascus. Haykal has no association with the Umar Bakri, but Umar Bakri would peddle this type of stuff here, claiming he studied 20 books of usul and meaning legal theory, and claiming to be a jurist. So he met one of our teachers, and there is a video recording of this, and our teacher started laughing at him and left the gathering. But at that time, he initially claimed to be a traditional Sunni Muslim. When he changed and became overtly not only just Salafi, but also takfiri, meaning declaring that.
I do remember when he moved away from Hizb and he became al-Muhajirun.
But you have to remember, for most people, that distinction wasn't there.
Even now, unfortunately, there's still some people that conflate the two.
So even for me at the time, there was no distinction at the time. So I never knew
al-Muhajirun, Hizb ut-Tahrir.
Meaning I conflated the two at the time. So that's what led to one of the early debates I had with Umar Bakri. So really? I debated Umar Bakri.
Really?
Umar Bakri, I debated on the phone. So I rang him, and this was in 2004. So I came back from Syria.
A phone debate.
And I debated him on the prophets being alive in the grave. So I mentioned a hadith in the Sahih of Imam Muslim, where the Prophet ﷺ said he passed on the night of Mi'raj the grave of Musa ﷺ. He was standing up and praying.
Yes.
مررت بقبر موسى عند الكثيب الأحمر وهو قائم يصلي. So Umar Bakri said to me that this hadith is weak. I said it's in Sahih Muslim, because the standard Sunni position is what's in Bukhari and Muslim is authentic. But he said no, there's a weak narrator. I said who? He said Thabit al-Bunani. Now anyone who knows anything of hadith science will know Thabit al-Bunani is authentic. He's one of the most authentic students of Anas bin Malik, the companion. So he weakened the hadith, and the proof he gave after this was in a certain area in the Levant in Syria. They dug up a grave of a prophet and they found nothing but ashes. This was the proof he gave. So the debate finished there, meaning he weakened the hadith. And then I had an interaction with Anjum Chaudhry, and Anjum Chaudhry misinterpreted a hadith. This was in Alam Rock. He misinterpreted a hadith, saying that the hadith states that a group of Muslims shall raid Al-Baytul Abiyad, the White House. He said, this is the White House in Washington, D.C.
Of course he did.
Yes. So I said to him, the hadith in Sahih Muslim is not referring to the White House in Washington, D.C. It's referring to the palace of the Persian king. And this event has occurred. Meaning, you're misinterpreting
of Kisra, I think it was.
the hadith. Now, in that engagement, he also denied the hadith of Sahih Muslim. If someone stuck to traditional Sunni Islam, yes, within traditional Sunni Islam, you also have people who move towards that method. But the difference is, the traditional Sunni methodology is not what is leading them to that.
But surely you'd consider. I don't mean to digress into kind of like theological semantics but like the Athariya, they're Sunnis, right? They would you regard them as Sunni?
See, the Athari creed is the Hanbalis, like in Damascus again, in Duma, an area known as Duma, the scholars are all Hanbali. Those are Atharis. So you have the likes of Muhammad bin Ahmad al-Safarini, rahimahullah ta'ala. He has many good works. 11th, he lived in the 1100s.
Was Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani Athari?
Hanbali. So you also have Ibn Balban. You have so many different scholars of the Athari creed. What people mix up is Taymiyyah thought with the broader meaning of Athari. So Ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi, all these Hanbali scholars. Ahmad bin Taymiyyah, Abu al-Abbas, was one scholar. So when we express Athari creed, we mean the overwhelming majority of the Hanbali scholars like Abdul Rahman bin al-Jawzi and the so many other scholars. These are all Hanbali scholars who are Athari, Sunni, from Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. But with Ibn Taymiyyah, was very learned. He's a scholar of magnificent learning. But the mistakes that he made, which he was taken to task for, people conflate that with Atharism, when in fact those mistakes have been critiqued by other scholars, and people should not follow him in his mistakes. And that should not be confused with authentic Atharism.
But I'd even go as far as to say that you can't even really compare and conflate many aspects of the modern Salafi movement with Ibn Taymiyyah's works, because I mean, we've spoken about this off camera a number of times when we've spoken that you make a distinction between classical Athari, who are generally from the Hanabila, and then Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, his works and some of his beliefs onward, right? But I'd even say, like, for example, if we were to compare, and I don't mean to digress, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, and to compare him to Ibn Taymiyyah,
there is no comparison.
Yeah.
Meaning Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab was a leader of a political movement that anathematized, declared all the leaders disbelievers, the Muslims of that time as disbelievers, and
rebelled against the Khilafah.
Yes, and rebelled against the Khilafah.
Or at least provided a theological basis for that rebellion. Back to then, let's say, okay, so you do still believe that in light of the many issues that we're facing with Islamophobia, with Prevent, with the reformist agenda, with the LGBT issue that's happening now, that's going to kick off in September 2020, with all of that which the Muslim community is facing, you still feel that there is a space and a need for intra-Muslim debates?
You see, if we don't have intra-Muslim debate and dialogue in the correct manner, these issues will grow, because the people who cause problems for us come from some theological way of thinking, meaning a flawed theological way of thinking. So a young man who joins ISIS will have a flawed theology. A person who deems homosexuality as permissible will have a flawed theology. A person who recognizes Israel will have a flawed theology. You will always find this congruency or correlation between flawed theology and flawed positions.
So are you then saying that intra-Muslim debates or I have to specify this because I make a distinction between Sunnis debating with Shia and intra-Sunni debate. So are you saying intra-Sunni?
No, but you would, at the same time, even you would not consider someone who believes homosexuality as a Sunni.
Of course not.
Yes.
No. That becomes an issue of belief and disbelief.
Exactly.
If they deny Qat'i text, then
if you look at the debates, most of the debates I've had, they have been on issues of Qat'iyat, meaning decisive issues.
Of course.
So if we do not engage on those things, then we lose recognition of a traditional understanding.
So you're saying that the debates internally among Sunni is kind of, it keeps you revitalized and relevant and a bit of
Sunnah deniers, people who deny the Sunnah,
the Quran, yeah.
Yes. So if that way of thinking became common amongst Muslims, they would have to be tackled. Likewise, rejection of Bukhari.
But Shaykh, I'm talking about intramural, like Deobandi, Salafis, Brelvi, Ash'ari, Maturidi, all these different groups that identify as Sunni. Their ulama debating each other on issues which, let's say, debates have taken place centuries ago.
Debates on issues they've written about.
Literally, like, remember when you and Abdul Rahman Azhar, you lot came with how many books do you remember? And like, I'm very sure from both sides, there was like maybe 5 to 10 books that were, but you lot came with so many books. What I'm trying to make is, in light of everything that's happening in the Muslim community, you still feel that there is a relevance for these debates.
Again, what you're trying to angle at is the
priorities.
If you prioritize, then any person who is learned would have to prioritize with those things which are more important, meaning to engage with. So if you have a choice of debating a person from any sect and the issue is not a priority as much as another issue, then you would have to prioritize. That, of course, would be common sense.
Okay, and you're still very young, mashallah. May Allah bless you and preserve you and give you good health. I mean, but of late, and by of late I mean the last couple of years, I would say, even though you did that initial interview on radio about not joining the British Armed Forces, but more and more now we're seeing Shaykh Asrar talk about things which, traditionally speaking, people from that background have not really spoken about. I'll be honest with you. So you've made some very principled and strong statements against Prevent. You've spoken against Israel. You're talking about Ottoman history and its relevance in our revival. You're talking about the issue of Khilafah. You know, the things are now, you're now broadening on a more public level, even debating atheists now, but like visiting universities. Is this a shift towards empowering youth that generally come from Sufi, Barelvi, Hanafi backgrounds, to empower them to basically get involved in things which other movements had generally dominated since the 90s?
You see, the purpose of traditional learning is to train an individual to deal with a host of issues. So if someone has traditional learning, they should be able to engage in various things, meaning not just in one issue, not being monolithic in their approach.
So why was the 90s such a key era? Look, let's not hide about it. I mean, the 90s was an era where I personally feel, from my reading, that the Barelvi and Deobandi community woke up and realized, whoa, we're losing many of our sons to the Salafis. We're losing many of our sons to Hizb ut-Tahrir and other groups which...
Early 90s, I was very young, so I don't remember the early 90s.
Late 90s.
Religiously.
Late 90s.
So from 96 to 2000, 4 years of engagement. And even then, I didn't have an association with too many people. I'm associated with Dawat Islami, the organization that Tabligh version from Pakistan. So that was my early association with what people would call Barelvi background, and they really gave me firstly I learned how to read Urdu, and meaning I read Urdu also, and additional to that, an exposure to the scene amongst those people who are traditionally termed as being Barelvi. But at that time I didn't realize the lack of engagement that circle of people have on other issues. But where did I get my impetus to read upon those issues was through those bookshops, meaning an exposure to literature. So when I would go to those bookshops I mentioned, they had the book Fromkin's work, Peace to End All Peace. So I read that in that period of time. And there was a series of books which Vasco da Gama and the Naval Crusades, 1066, How Islamophobia Entered the British Isles. some of these books are out of print. How Britain colonized India, Pharaoh's Legacy, Ahmed Thompson's Dajjal book.
Yeah, infamous book.
Yes.
Famous, not infamous.
Musa David's work, Satanic Voices.
Yeah.
Yes. These were books I read in 97, 98, 99, that period of time. And I would say they formulated my way of thinking politically. So I was always engaged in, meaning those early works are what formed my way of thinking, as well as the autobiography of Malcolm X and a few additional works that I still have the copies of these books in my library. So that formed my mindset in how to engage politically with different things. But then going ahead and interacting with ulama in Syria also, who I would say in the Syrian scholarship in terms of dealing with atheists, Syrian scholarship in terms of politics is very much advanced, meaning compared to other parts of the Muslim world.
But even
like Abdurrahman Hassan Habannaka, one scholar, the son of a Shaykh Hassan Habannaka. He has written works on everything. Shaykh Abdurrahman Hassan Habannaka is a name for you to check out.
I will do. But those who don't know Shaykh Asrar, and those who've not spent time with you, and those who are just coming, because I know there's more and more interest growing from other groups and movements about you and some of the things that you have said. I know this from people I've interacted with. Even you going and visiting certain events at Barelvi or Barelvi inclined Masajid, your message has been quite clear, and that is, look, move away from the kind of bad practices that are associated with this group and this background, and start becoming more involved and more prepared and developed in those things which matter. Now, for example, a couple of years ago, you were at a conference, Sunni conference, where you actually criticized quite heavily fake beards. And instead you encouraged traditional learning and to equip yourself with how to deal with atheism and deal with these issues. That, for me, the way I understood it was that you're basically were trying to encourage the shabab that, look, times are changing and we need to now kind of undergo more traditional learning, and not only the traditional, and make it relevant to our reality. Would that be a correct?
That would be correct. Meaning Sunni Islam is more dynamic than we make out. Meaning it's the range of topics is more broad than permissibility of Gyarmi, Mawlid, even though to me those subjects have a relevance in their time and place. But there are Sunni Muslim figures who've shown that there is a broader picture also being played out. Like in Pakistan, Shah Ahmad Nurani was such a figure. There are a few others as well, meaning they saw a broader picture of things like IMF loans in Pakistan. Scholars need to address the economy of Pakistan. So the typical stereotype of a Maulvi in Pakistan is someone who comes from a poor background,
wasn't academically bright, couldn't make it.
Yes, and his parents placed him in a madrasa, and then he's limited to
teaching Arabic, Quran, and that's
no, not even teaching Arabic. Limited to sectarian issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
And cannot engage in modern politics or modern economy or modern.
It's the same.
Teaching children and then going and doing some supplications and things like this.
And is limited to that role. So that's the stereotype. But now scholars need to engage
up the game.
Yes.
Okay.
Just quickly, Sheikh, how would you define traditional Sunni? What is the traditional Sunni?
Because sometimes it bugs me, and I tell you, it's whenever I sit with ulama from different schools and backgrounds, and when they say Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, I know that in their definition they're excluding some people. I know that when some say Sunni, they're excluding some people, and it makes it difficult.
So for me, and from the scholars that I learned from, we define Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah as follows of the four schools who stick to Ash'ari, Maturidi and Athari creed. Now, the modern labels like Salafi or Deobandi or any other label you may have, those people need to move back, take a step back and leave those labels and go back to the traditional identities.
So just on that then, when you met with Ustad Abdul Rahman Hassan, the pre-debate condition meeting, I remember very clearly you said, I believe in the unity of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi rahimahullah. Do you remember you said that to him? And I've always said that to you. What is that unity, number one? And how do you envisage a unity amongst Muslims who identify as Sunni in the UK?
So Sultan Salahuddin al-Ayyubi rahimahullah, the first military campaign he undertook was under Nuruddin Zengi.
Yes.
By the way, both traditional Ash'ari Sufis.
Yes.
It was to
Shafi.
To Shafi in school, to topple the so-called Fatimi government in Egypt.
The pseudo-caliphate.
Yes. So that was a part of the unity. Additional to that, what did he have? He had his Aqidah recited on all the minarets of Syria and Egypt. The Aqidah is printed. The Aqidah of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi.
Which is what I've never heard of this.
It's a printed book where he condemns Mujassima anthropomorphic beliefs and meaning a traditional Sunni Ash'ari text. He had this recited from all the minarets and taught in all the masajid. He had the salawat recited before and after the adhan. So if you go to Al-Quds today, in Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, after the adhan, they recite As-salatu was-salamu alayka ya Rasulullah.
Same in Turkey.
So Saudi Arabia now prohibits salawat before and after the adhan. But in Al-Quds al-Sharif, that has continued from the time of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. Additional to that, what did Salahuddin al-Ayyubi do? He preserved all the historical sites in the Muslim world, in Egypt, in the Levant, and in the Hijaz. Some of those things are still preserved today. So in Al-Quds al-Sharif, in Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, 200 Islamic sites are preserved. By the Ottomans, who also did the same, Sultan Sulaiman Yavaz,
because they spent a lot of money in restoration and preservation.
Why did they preserve all of this? Because this has a relevance. But when we observe the Salafi movement, the opposite is done. Not only the Madkhali form, the other form. ISIS was the unbridled form of Salafism. And ISIS destroyed its historical sites. Saudi Arabia is the bridal form of Salafism. They also destroy, meaning the Khaybar fort is preserved in Saudi Arabia. But the historical sites associated with the Prophet ﷺ, they purposefully destroyed them. So when we say the unity of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, it means the correct theological and political ideology can only preserve Islam. Salafism, pseudo-Salafism cannot preserve the political identity of Islam. It has failed in the past 100 years. Sunni Islam, I'm not saying Brelvism, meaning some of them will say, what is, meaning Brelvism is a later thing. Traditional Sunni Islam, as was understood by Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, all the Brelvis or majority
but they say we're Athari. They say we're Athari and therefore we should be included within that.
Meaning Athari is the traditional school of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahimahullah ta'ala,
who are traditionally also known as Ahl al-Hadith, right?
Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal permitted someone to touch the mimbar of the Prophet ﷺ for tabarruk, blessings, supplicate. Imam Ahmad permitted placing the hair of the Prophet ﷺ in fact, when the Mu'tazila lashed him in the Mihna, they took his shirt off and he said, look after this shirt because it contains the hair of the Prophet ﷺ. If they had that Athari belief, then there would be no issues. There are so many other things with Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. Athari creed is the creed of Imam Ahmad, not the creed of Ibn Taymiyyah.
Okay, let's put aside then. Okay, let's put aside the unity of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. Let's.
By the way, when I went to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa recently, I went to Jericho. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi had preserved the grave, what they say is the grave of Musa alayhi salam, because Al-Kathib al-Ahmar is the red dune hill. He preserved the site. He had people buried around the grave for blessings, and he had a seat made for himself where he would, once a year, he would take an urs, an Urs, a march from Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa to the grave of Musa alayhi salam to counter the Christian Easter celebrations.
Yeah.
And he would sit on the seat, and then the ulama would do speeches. All of this would be condemned today. If the pseudo-Salafis were ruling in Masjid al-Aqsa, they will do half the work of the Israelis. Destroy all the Islamic sites, all the graves will be destroyed. Anything which they believe is a sign of shirk, they would destroy. I mean, half the job of the Israelis would be done. So you have the Israelis removing Islamic history in occupied Palestine, and you have the pseudo-Salafis in Makkah al-Mukarramah and al-Madinah al-Munawwarah raising, like the house of Sayyiduna Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh, is the location of is the location of KFC today.
Yes,
KFC is built. The Ottomans preserved all of this. We haven't seen these things. That's why we do not realize the immensity of what they are doing. The road that goes down, they call it Misfala, but this is Tariqul Hijrah. Why did the Ottomans name it Tariqul Hijrah? To mark the route of the Prophet ﷺ in Hijrah. And they preserved the house of Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq. Imagine the distinction between the rule of traditional Sunni Islam and the distinction of belief of pseudo-Salafism. Likewise, the Shia Rawafid, if they ruled, they would preserve certain things, but they would destroy certain things.
Yeah.
So the only balanced theology, or the correct, there's no such thing as balanced, the correct theology is Sunni Islam.
Okay, so let me ask you something, and I have to ask you something, and I don't want to go into it too much. Isn't there evidences from the companions? I believe it's Umar ibn Khattab
cut down the tree.
Cut down the tree, and also the leveling of graves.
Okay. Again, that citation of that narration.
Also, another thing, the Ottomans in the early period, from the time of Sultan Osman rahimahullah, the very early Ottoman sultans, they never used to build on graves. Their graves were very simple.
Again, answering both things. With Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh, the cutting down of the tree is cited commonly to justify what they are doing. The reason why Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh had the tree cut down is because he said no one knows where the tree is located. The narration mentions this. That was the incorrect tree. So he had the tree removed. But there are other narrations of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh preserving the sites. For instance, there was a pipe in Al-Madinah al-Munawwarah. The pipe, water was overflowing from the pipe. Sayyidina Umar said, remove this pipe. Sayyidina Abbas radiallahu anh came and said the Prophet ﷺ himself had this pipe placed. So Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh had this pipe replaced, meaning not replaced, returned back to its location. So there are multiple narrations of him preserving the sites. Likewise with other companions. These are found in the debates, meaning the books between both groups. The Sunni Muslims cite so many different narrations, like Anas bin Malik preserving the hair of the Prophet ﷺ, the slippers of the Prophet ﷺ.
But from your reading and research, have you found anything genuinely from an impartial, objective, fair point of view, from your research and reading of the Prophet ﷺ's time and the Salaf al-Salihin, that period, have you found any authentic information and evidences where they did level graves and they did discourage?
So now we go on to graves. So you have the sites and then you have graves. With graves, you mentioned Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh had tents placed on graves. Structure, meaning it's in the Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shaybah. He had structures placed on top of the graves, meaning a tent.
Umar ibn Khattab.
Yes, in the Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shaybah. Famous hadith. The companions who didn't place things on the grave, remember this is a fiqh issue, they didn't demolish the graves, or nor did they disencourage Muslims from visiting those graves. The Wahhabis who are in Al-Baqi today, meaning these what they call mutawwa, they stand around
the religious police.
Yes, they disencourage people from visiting the graves, which is disencouraging people from knowing the sites, the locations of the graves of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. If it were up to them, they would stop them. But additional to that, in the discussion on building structures on the graves, the Hanafi school states that the structure that is on top of the grave cannot be longer than an arm's length. There's no doubt on this. There's a dislike for having a structure longer than an arm's length. If it were limited to when they take over a region, they bring the level of the grave down, not with dynamites. You bring in architects who can bring the level of the grave with respect because of the person buried under, meaning the grave of Sayyidah Fatima radiallahu anha. But what they permitted is building around the grave. In one debate, I had a debate with a pseudo-Salafi, and Asad Beg was there as well. This was in 2007 with their teacher in Al-Madinatul Munawwara. He accepted my point where I said, if a person is buried in a room, that is permitted. He said, how? I said, look at the grave of the Prophet ﷺ. It has 4 walls and a roof. He said, that's specific to the Prophet ﷺ. I said, if that were the case, why would Sayyiduna Abu Bakr and Sayyiduna Umar radiallahu anhuma be buried there also? So he said, okay, if the room is already constructed, you can bury them, but you cannot build a room. He came to that conclusion, even though this is something absurd. So if an example of this, the grave of Amir Muawiyah radiallahu anh in Bab Saghir in Syria. Today in Bab Saghir, the grave of Amir Muawiyah radiallahu anh has a Mamluki structure and a dome. Imagine if we followed the pseudo-Salafi fatwa, they'll destroy it. Who would go and attempt to dig the grave? The Rawafid. They would attempt. To the credit of the Awqaf in Syria, they lock the grave and they do not permit anyone to enter because they do not want anyone to touch the structure of the grave. So the preservation of the graves is done by building 4 walls around the graves and a roof. This is permitted. And as for on top of the grave, what is permitted is an arm's length of a structure. This is permitted. As for your second question regarding the Ottomans, the early Ottomans, they didn't build structures. Many of the early Muslims didn't build structures, but they did not destroy the site of a grave if it had a wall around it, or disencourage Muslims from the location of those graves. Like the grave of Imam Bukhari in Uzbekistan, they would go to the grave of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala. Additional to that, the likes of Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, when he passed away, he gave the wasiyah, the will, that no structure should be placed on top of my grave. So they built a wall around the grave. At one point, they made a structure on top of the grave. A tree grew out of the grave and the tree destroyed the structure. They cut the tree down, they built another structure. The tree grew again and broke the structure. Some of them count this as his karamat, one of his miracles. The tree grew and then they left the tree, and it's a unique tree. It's the only type of tree in the world. What happened with the ISIS when they ruled that region? They placed dynamites. Oh, they didn't rule. I think they came. They placed dynamites around the wall, and they destroyed the entire maqam. And Al-Imam Nawawi's grave was in accordance with the Sunnah. There was no structure. It was in accordance with the Sunnah, meaning the Sunnah is that the graves be maximum of 1 arm's length, even though the grave of Sayyiduna Uthman bin Mad'un radiallahu anh, the Prophet ﷺ placed a huge boulder on top. It was so huge that the young men would have competitions on who can jump over the boulder. So that's permitted. And the scholars use this in the Sunan of Abu Dawud. So it's an issue of fiqh. But what they have gone and done is destroying Islamic history. So they have done the job for the Israelis wherever they have gone. So and Muhammad bin Salman being pro-Israel, and Muhammad bin Salman allowing muharramat, allowing concerts but not allowing the Mawlid. What type of injustice is this? That which Madkhali scholar or pro-Saudi scholar, pseudo-Salafi scholar, pro-Saudi, has outside of the kingdom condemned the kingdom for permitting concerts but not permitting the Mawlid?
From my understanding, I've not read one yet, I've seen some criticize him, but not that you disallow this thing and allow this thing. I'm not seeing.
Meaning it's a great contradiction. You imagine a young Saudi growing up, not visiting the grave of the Prophet ﷺ. There are so many Saudis in the kingdom, they've been told it's bid'ah, so they don't go. They will live in the kingdom all their lives
and not visit.
And they don't visit the grave of the Prophet ﷺ. They are told Mawlid is haram. They are told that we have no connection with the Prophet ﷺ as of now, meaning he was a prophet, he's passed away. Some of them may believe he is bones, some of them, meaning this is a belief that some of them hold, minority of them, but they do hold this. And then he goes to these concerts organized by Mohammed bin Salman. Will the result not be secularism?
But it's already started.
If that's what's happening,
one of the highest levels of atheism is in Saudi Arabia.
And then the harshness of the application of Sharia. Meaning application of Sharia is also a different subject. Of course, there is a method of applying Sharia, and the Sunni method has more clemency, has more mercy.
As envisaged in nearly 423 years of the Ottoman state, at the very least, would you say?
The Khulafa Rashidun.
Oh yes, of course. But in terms
later
of
history, Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, post the Salaf, can you name me a ruler who achieved what Salahuddin al-Ayyubi rahimahullah achieved? And his grave is preserved in Damascus. If the Salafis ruled, that grave would also be demolished. Meaning they have some enmity against preservation of historical sites.
Look, putting the issue of graves aside, yeah, I know I raised it, but nipping that on the bud now. But coming back to the issue of how groups and movements who identify as Sunni can unite.
They can unite on issues
here in the UK
of concern. So
prevent.
Some of the scholars wrote a statement against Israel. Yes.
Which
Israel is the greatest enemy of Islam today. Yes. Zionism is the greatest enemy of Islam today. There is no greater enemy of Islam. We should unite against this enemy. From your experience, how many of them are willing to unite on this?
I think with the issue of that statement, Sheikh, since we're discussing it now on the podcast, I got positive feedback on the sentiments of the statement, but I think they weren't ready for the way in which it was worded. It was quite...
So they should word a document against the state of Israel and release that document, and then they will find myself a willing signatory to that document.
Inshallah.
So what more unity do you want?
Okay, so can I name you some things which you feel that we kind of... Okay, so Israel is one.
Israel is
prevent
at the top of the list. Israel is at the top of the list.
Israel is, but not in... Okay, so Israel is top of the list, but on non-specific order. Prevent, do you think Muslims can unite on prevent?
Meaning Muslims unite against prevent.
Against the prevent strategy and its very, very problematic manifestation within the community.
It's Orwellian control.
Yes. The RSC agenda, the sex education agenda,
LGBT at large.
LGBT large.
But how many of these scholars are willing to say that homosexual inclinations are a desire that a young man grows into as opposed to being born with? Meaning the pseudoscience, I'm against Muslims presenting pseudoscience. Some Muslims do this also when they talk about the miracles of the Quran. They present sometimes pseudoscience.
Scientific miracles.
It's not a scholastic, a scholarly
like numbers and things like this, yeah?
Yes, or so many other things, meaning scientific data that cannot be verified.
Yeah.
This claim that people are born homosexual is pseudoscience. It's based on the Kinsey report, so that was done in the 1930s.
But that is pseudoscience. It has no real basis.
It is pseudoscience, but it is today sold as fact that people are born homosexual. So how many of these scholars are willing to word a document and say people are not born homosexual? It's a desire that they may have, but they are prohibited from that desire. This is the Islamic tradition.
I don't mean to have a dig at you at all, but Birmingham ulama have kind of been very silent from all groups regarding the parents protesting. I've been disappointed at that.
Locally, the reason for that is locally there's not much awareness. And because I've been engaged...
The whole country knows about it.
Locally there's not much awareness. Because I've been engaged with other things, one man cannot deal with so many things that meaning you have to remember the Zionist lobby and this LGBTQ lobby are the two most powerful lobbies in the UK and in America.
Definitely.
So they will target anyone who opposes them in all ways. Aggressively. Meaning this thing about freedom of speech, it doesn't exist. We do live in 1984, meaning to a degree.
So would you encourage ulama to start coming out and talking out against, quite openly and unapologetically, against Israel and the LGBT lobby and these kind of things?
Unity on these issues is a powerful thing. So if so far the statement on Israel has been signed by 30 plus people,
34.
Imagine if hundreds signed that.
And you already rocked some feathers. We had an article in the Jewish News, the Jewish Chronicle, by their puppet Fiaz Mughal, the Zionist puppet.
Ruffled some feathers.
Ruffled. What did I say?
Rocked.
Okay,
ruffled some feathers.
Yeah.
He always tries to correct me, but it's good you did it.
Rocked is outrageous. Carry on.
Okay, but did you read the article?
No.
And that was only, and that was like one of their main media publications, and that was only 33 ulama who signed it. I mean, look, I'd encourage.
Obviously, hearing 34 is disappointing, because you'd think on something as basic and fundamental as Israel Zionism, it should be.
No, but some ulama, they did get back to me. And
I understand.
And look, in their defense, right, Shaykh, and I conveyed this to you as well, they did say that, look, many of us are board of trustees, we're part of charities, and this kind of statement, if it goes public with our names associated, even if we omit our institution, with the ICHR definition, or basically the International Holocaust Foundation definition of anti-Semitism, Charity Commission can now come and shut down. So there is an element of fear.
Would you say that this is wahan?
That's
not necessarily, meaning we should not rush to be judgmental of.
No, I'm just asking.
Of certain scholars, but the statement was said on an independent platform. So there is no involvement of the Charity Commission. Meaning, if it was said on a platform that is a charity, then there would be issues. But it's said meaning the statement is signed by individuals as individuals. And I don't believe legally there should be any issues with that.
So even the legal issue, Sheikh, I think what some cited to me was, because obviously I was in contact with a number of ulama from different backgrounds, who, by the way, no one said anything negative about the statement. They were all supportive.
But additional to this, what are the issues are there to unite on? Meaning these are the main.
Israel, prevent LGBT and the reformist agenda. Like changing fundamentals of the deen, like Khilafah is alien to Islam and Hudud does not exist and these kind of things.
Well, I think there is a unity on these things.
Okay. And so do you feel these are things which, whether you regard them as Ahl Sunnah but if they regard themselves as Sunni, these are things which we can and should unite on? And
do you think that these imams and scholars and these mashayikh from these different organizations or madhahib would happily share platform if it was for these areas?
They already are, meaning there are ulama who are holding gatherings together, meaning from various groups, and they are engaging in this. But as I said, my stance on the theological debate stays the same, meaning internally we can debate those variant theological debates.
Bringing the podcast to an end and bringing it to a closure, I'm probably, maybe it's the wrong question to ask, but it's one that needs to be asked. Inundated with problems domestically, wars, oppression, occupation abroad, the state of the Ummah seems pretty dire at the moment. You've already inferred earlier on in the podcast about the end of times, especially what's happening in Hijaz and Saudi Arabia and these kind of things. From your reading, your understanding, your observation, where do you see what's happening?
We are living on the time on the brink of the great Ashratu Sa'ah. So expect worst thing. The Euphrates River will dry. A mountain of gold will appear. Meaning that's a sign the Prophet ﷺ foretold. From every 199 people will die, foretelling great wars in the Middle East. People in the Hijaz will fight for the throne, meaning 3 sons of a king will die fighting for that gold. An army from Syria will enter into the Hijaz, meaning these are worse things are yet to happen. So these are Ayyam al-Sabr, days of patience. Grasp onto your deen like meaning we grasp onto the deen like hot ember in this time. But Al-Imam Badruddin al-Hassani, Shaykh Muhammad Awama mentions, Al-Imam Badruddin al-Hassani was asked in his time, in the early 1900s, do we live in the time where a person is a patient one is grasping onto a hot ember? He said no. He said we live in the time يُصْبِحُ الْمَرْءُ مُؤْمِنًا وَيُمْسِي كَافِرًا, that a person will wake up in the morning as a believer and become a disbeliever in the evening.
He said in the early 1900s?
In the early 1900s. So you had the reformist movements and so many different things. We live in that time. We're safeguarding your iman. This is why my emphasis on Islamic theology. Safeguarding iman and then piety. Meaning it's a two-pronged approach. Safeguarding iman and then action. Meaning sweetness of iman and action, and dhikrullah and remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mean, this is that time we preserve our iman.
And surely from that, would you then say that a natural outcome of that would then be to engage in da'wah and activism on certain causes?
You see where the result is with Allah.
Yeah.
I remember discussing with some of the young Ikhwani people in 2000. They considered protesting as one of the main things that we should do as Muslims. But this is where I disengaged from them, meaning in our dialogue, where I said protesting is not, meaning protests generally do not achieve much. What have they achieved? All it takes is for a legitimate group to do a protest, but then 5 people entering the protest and shouting things which are against that very same group, which can then incite the police or incite other people to take action. I mean, protests are not the way the Muslim Ummah will progress. There's a strength of iman, faith, and action, meaning the shuyukh who do mention praying Fajr Salah, meaning a person cannot wake up for Fajr Salah and perform Salah in Jama'ah, congregation, do dhikr of Allah, recite the Quran, memorize the Quran. How will they achieve greater things? وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ لَيَسْتَخْلِفَنَّهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. The promise is based on 2 things. Allah promises those who believe from amongst you belief. You cannot establish anything if you don't believe in angels, you don't have belief in the ghaib, you don't have strength of iman. But وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, but they do good actions. Those are the 2 things. The natural result of that is istikhlaf fil ard. But if it doesn't happen, a person can never be disappointed, because tama', coveting the dunya, is also an illness of the heart. And this is where the 4 arkan of Islam. What are the 4 arkan? The 4 pillars. Not the 5 pillars of Islam, meaning the 4 things Jibreel alayhi salam discussed with the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Islam, Iman, Ihsan, Ashratu Sa'a. So Islam, practice, Iman, strength of Iman, Ihsan, the spirituality, and the 4th was Ashratu Sa'a, and I would encourage everyone to read up on Ashratu Sa'a, signs at the end of time.
Signs at the end of times. Bringing the podcast to an end now, I don't know how to frame what I'm about to ask you, because I don't know. So usually we invite our guests to 3 things. We kind of base this from the great.
It's one of the signs of the ends of the podcast.
Yeah, got the inspiration came from when the companions used to go to lands and used to say, right, it's either Islam, jizya, or fight. But it's not like that, because obviously we're Muslims. So what we tend to do is we offer an arm wrestle or a thumb war, or I invite you to have some Bengali delicacy known as shibari and pan.
Because I'm not a violent extremist, I'll go with the Bengali.
We are not violent extremists.
We're not violent extremists either, yeah?
We are enthusiasts in some hobbies that involve physicality.
Are you gonna have some bun or is it just your body?
Both. You go the full way, inshallah.
Do you want the crushed rose petal?
Yes, everything.
Oh, yeah, okay. Do you know what?
Make it a real Sileti.
Okay, here we go. I'm joining the party as well then, inshallah.
Okay, but there's only a bit of bun. You can have the shubari.
No, I don't. I'm not really a big bun guy anyway, to be honest. I'm trying to break that stereotype. You can make it sweeter for the Sheikh. Come on, stop that.
It's more than a chef.
So what do you do with
So
this?
you put it to one side of your mouth.
And just leave it there.
And no. You just chew as it goes.
And anything happens, we make tawbah afterwards.
Yeah.
Inshallah.
Brother Sheikh, Jazakallah khair for honouring us with your presence. Hopefully with the first time of many visits to the Blood Brothers podcast.
Inshallah.
Brothers and sisters, that's all for today. Please remember to like, share and comment on this video. Your comment doesn't have to be positive all the time. Just leave a comment.
Positive ones.
I get too many negative ones.
Do you?
So please leave positive comments.
Yeah, leave positive ones for the Sheikh as well, and, share this video. Subscribe to the 5 Pillars channel. For our viewers from the United States of America and North America generally, subscribe to the Mad Mamluks channel. And until next time,
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Black Brothers out.
Blood Brothers Podcast. 5 Pillars of Mad Monoliths production.